DBAs. Maybe you have one, maybe you're thinking about setting one up, and today we're going to dive in and decode everything to do with doing business as or DBAs. So during today's training, I'm going to teach you what DBAs are, why people get them, how they work. You're going to learn the pros, the really good things that DBAs can do for you. You're going to learn the cons, the things you really have to look out for and be aware of when you're setting up DBAs. We're even going to talk about the exact process you need to go through to set up a DBA for your company. And again, a lot of different reasons that this might work for you. We've got a lot to cover, so let's dive in. So DBAs, when we talk about DBAs, this is basically an acronym for doing business as, okay? It's particularly helpful for sole proprietors. So we're going to talk about how this affects a lot of different businesses, but it's very popular with sole proprietorships, and you'll learn exactly why here as we dive further in. Now, it's basically also called a fictitious name. Okay, so it's also called the assumed business name filing for your business. The reason I want you to understand these names is that you're going to set these up with your Secretary of State, and they all call something different. A lot of times they're referred to as DBA. Sometimes they're referred to as doing business as. Sometimes they're referred to as a fictitious name. Down here in Florida, if you're doing this, you're filling out what's called a fictitious name affidavit. So it's different in the states, but these are the most common names that DBAs go by. So if your name, for example, is Mary Johnson, well, you probably don't want your business to be named Mary Johnson, right? Particularly when you're trying to create a business where you're going to employ people and you're going to promote people. And this is one of the most common uses of DBAs. So when we look at why people have DBAs, let's look at California, for example. In California, it could be $600 to set up a corporation. Way cheaper to set up a sole proprietor. So if you set yourself up as a sole proprietor, well, your name is the business name. Well, you might not want to be out there promoting yourself as, Ty Crandall being the actual business name that employs people and sells products and services. So an example of where people use DBAs. Now, a company said to be doing business as when that name under which they operate their business differs from its legal registered name. So in this case, if you're a sole proprietor and your name is the business, in my case, Ty Crandall, and I want to actually go out and do business as Credit Suite, well, that's one of the reasons that people oftentimes do a DBA is because they want to operate public facing in a different name than what their actual legal entity is structured as. And I just gave you one example, talking about many examples of why you can use DBAs, but this is one example of somebody that sets himself up as a sole proprietorship. Their name is a sole proprietorship. They don't want their name to be the business name that's front facing. So they create a DBA to basically have a different name that they can operate under. And Corey said 2 minutes and 40 seconds to go time. I like that Corey was here early, and you can get in early on our social platforms and be here right as we go live. Eric, good morning from Vegas. Thanks for coming in. Vanessa, thanks for coming in as well, both from YouTube, LinkedIn, Periscope. Everybody's in the house today. Now, some states require that a business owner make DBA or fictitious business name filings if you're even going to use another name that you operate under. And of course, that's just not even necessarily for legal protection, but so they know who you are. You don't want to have an entity go have an unregistered DBA you're operating under, do all kinds of unscrupulous, crazy, unethical things, and then the actual state doesn't know how to get to you. So a lot of states require that if you're going to operate under any other name, that you file this, again, fictitious business name filing. In Florida, it's called a fictitious name affidavit. Now, this is for the protection of consumers conducting business with the entity. No fictitious business name may include the words corporation, Inc., incorporation, or corp. So again, you can't set up a DBA to make it look like you're a corporation when you're not. So any words, Inc. or anything like that, the name, are not allowed in most states. Those states that I know of, because that would make it out to be like you're trying to get the perception of a corporation when you're not. Okay, unless it's a real registered corporation. So our official name is Credit Suite Inc. because we're an actual incorporation. You couldn't do that if you were an actual LB or an LLC. So what isn't a DBA? Well, DBA isn't a business structure. It's not an actual entity type. It doesn't provide any personal asset protection like an LLC or a corporation. So when we look at entity structure, right? An entity, for example, is a corporation. Well, it's a legal structure, and it kind of provides some level of asset protection. Now, I'm not an attorney, and what you're going to see today is not legal advice, nor am I an accountant, and you could talk to both professionals in this area. But again, what this does is it separates you two. So Credit Suite is a corporation, and I am an individual. Well, we're separate from each other. So if the corporation ever gets sued, they're not necessarily suing me, right? I can build business credit for Credit Suite and separate our liability. But I can't do that if I'm a sole proprietorship. If I'm a sole proprietorship, I am the business. You sue the business, you're suing me. I can't even build business credit without a personal guarantee because I am the business. I am one and the same as the business. A DBA doesn't change that. Just because you file a DBA, you are still liable for your business debts. Somebody can still sue the business and they're suing you as a result. Again, I'm not an attorney, not legal advice, but that's the structure. So you have to keep in mind, a DBA doesn't give you the protections you get under entity types like corporations or even being in an LLC. Merely having a DBA doesn't change shares or liability for partnerships or sole proprietorships. The DBA name helps with banking and branding the business, okay? But the business owner's personal assets are still completely exposed to lawsuits and creditors if you are a sole proprietor. Okay, so you have to keep that in mind, is that it's very good for branding. It's very good to operate under a different name for a lot of reasons we're going to talk about here in this training, but it doesn't give you any kind of personal asset protection. It doesn't shield you or protect you from creditors, from lawsuits, all the things that setting up a separate entity like a corporation or setting yourself up as a DBA actually will do. So why might a business want to file a DBA? Well, actually, there's many different reasons you might want to do this. One reason is you have a registered formal business entity looking to branch out to new products, services, or brands. So, for example, maybe you want to come out and your Credit Suite and you deal with business credit, and then you want to get into a startup business. You want to start teaching businesses how to get their business off the ground. You want to operate under startup training. And maybe you don't want to just name your product something. Maybe you want to create a startup accelerator. We have a startup accelerator product. Maybe we want a whole startup accelerator to be our brand for that product. Well, that would be a good reason for a DBA, for example. So maybe we want to come in and we still want to be Credit Suite, but we want to also be known as Startup Accelerator to help people start businesses as well. So there's a reason why you might choose a DBA to branch out to new products or services, for example. Or we might want to rebrand in general and not change the entity type. Okay, that's very common. So, we've got, I know of a lot of friends that do this exact same thing where they've actually changed from one company to another. Okay. And when you do that, you don't want to go back possibly and change and start a whole new entity because you have that longevity on the entity. It looks good. Credit Suite was, founded in 2012, right? So we don't want to lose that 8 years that from the date we were actually founded. Actually, our corporation was filed 2015. The concept started 2012. So we don't want to lose all that timeliness just because we potentially want to change our brand name. So this could be a reason is that you still operate under your original entity name, but you have a DBA that's under your newly branded company name. Another reason is you have an unregistered business, such as a sole proprietorship or partnership, and would like to operate under a name other than your personal name. We talked about that, right? Maybe you are, Ty Crandall, and I don't want to be known as Ty Crandall as the business name when we're out selling products and services. So this is the most common use of a DBA, is that it's used for sole proprietors so they don't have to operate under their own individual business name. And again, this option should only be used by businesses with very low profit and risk because, again, sole proprietorship is not scalable. It's just not. Like you don't find people that are doing 7- and 8-figure businesses that are sole proprietors. It might be a way you get the business off the ground, but I've never seen a business not shift to an entity that protects them like an LLC or corporation as the business grows. Now, what are the benefits of filing a DBA? Well, expanded branding. A maker of swimming pools may want to branch out to make swimsuits, for example. With DBA, the business can create a brand new brand without having to change the old one or change the actual entity type. It also provides you increased privacy. So as we talk about as a sole proprietor, you don't want your name to be the public-facing name because then everybody would know it. Maybe you don't want that to be the case. It also helps with access to funding. That's my world, right? Because you can accept payments in the business's name rather than your surname as you would if you're a sole proprietor. And it can increase trust and credibility. Now, again, if you really want to become more fundable, if you want to really increase trust and credibility, you need to stay away from sole proprietors. And again, a lot of us say, why would you even do a sole proprietorship? But we forget that, again, in states like California, it's $600 to set up an entity. So maybe you want the path of least resistance just to try to get a business off the ground to test your concept. And you don't want to spend $600 for a corporation if it's not going to work. So maybe you have an idea and you want to sell a widget and you don't want to pay $600 to get the entity set up and then, be $1,000, $2,000, $3,000 into this to even test to see if it works. You could cheaply throw up a sole proprietorship, throw the product out to market, and get a DBA to hide your name, and then boom, the product takes off. Then you go and get an LLC or corporation. So again, it increases your trust and increases your credibility. It's not long-standing that you're going to be a DBA, but it's one of those things that you can use in the interim if you are actually set up as a sole proprietor. So another reason is that you use a domain name as a DBA. So you might come in, and I've done this before. I made a mistake of, setting up a business. My company's name was Elite Credit. We didn't own elitecredit.com, and I never make that mistake again. Now, whenever I set up a business, I won't set up a business unless I can get the domain. Okay. But maybe you didn't do that. Maybe you set up your business. Now that company's taking off. I don't own the actual domain name. So then maybe I want to get a domain that's instead of Elite Credit, it's Elite Credit Services. My real company name is Elite Credit. And then I go get a DBA for Elite Credit Services so I can have the domain Elite Credit Services. So there's another benefit that you can actually use with this. Sean, thanks for coming in from Albany, Georgia, from LinkedIn. Marlon, hey, man, can you set up a DBA from an LLC? We're going to talk about that here in a few minutes. Jessica, good morning. Everybody from Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn, and Periscope, thanks for tuning in. So this allows for operations as another business or website. A DBA can be filed for a company to transact business under the company's domain name. Okay, so again, as an example, and I'll give you an example here. We have a businessfinancesuite.com. So we are a credit suite. The main product we sell that helps business owners improve their fundability, build business credit, and get financing is called the Business Finance Suite. So we have the Business Finance Suite as a DBA, right? We own the domain businessfinancesuite.com. So that's another benefit. You might want to do it. We're Credit Suite. We want to own businessfinancesuite.com. So we register that DBA businessfinancesuite.com so we can operate and do business under that name as well. So an example there. It's especially helpful when your company name is not available as a domain name. And again, I've talked to you about not making that mistake. Nowadays, I recommend everybody make sure the domain's available before you even get the company and go with that company name. But if you've already made that mistake, or you really love a business name where the domain's not available and you've looked at the pros and cons and decided to do it, well, then you might want to get a DBA that's just that actual domain name for that reason, or for that in that example. So another use to create a separate brand for different buyer persona, okay, or customer avatar. So hence you file a DBA to register the new fictitious business name and even create a separate website specifically targeting that audience. Okay. DBA can also be used as a more memorable name. So let's look at this other example. Let's say, for example, that, transportation, truck drivers, real estate agents, real estate investors are really big client base for us because they love to build business credit. They understand the separating of liability. They understand getting business credit in their business name without a personal guarantee or credit check. So maybe we want to be, a DBA to actually appeal to one of those markets. So maybe we want to be, real estate investor business credit hub. Okay, we're the hub for business credit for real estate investors. Maybe we want to do that. We want to actually go to that demographic of real estate investors with a name that specifically says Real Estate Investors Hub for Business Credit. And that way it attracts more people. They're like, wow, these guys are the experts at business credit for real estate investors. So it makes people more inclined to go with us because they see us as their expert in that niche because our DBA was set up. So that's another example. A DBA can also be used as a more memorable name, okay? The legal name might be long, hard to spell, pronounce, difficult to remember. Maybe you made those mistakes. Maybe you love the business name. Maybe it was named after your grandfather, and that's what you really wanted to do to pay homage to him. But the reality is it's very difficult to say and spell, and you get a DBA because you need to have something that's easier to access. It's more memorable. So a lot of different examples of where a DBA can be used, but that's yet another one. Now, more benefits. There are some clients who might require you to have a DBA in order to enter into a contract with them. So if you're if a freelancer bids to do work for a local corporation, that freelancer may be required to have a DBA, and that's common. So let's say you come in and you want to get a gig for the county, the state. You want to get a gig for a big company, and they're not going to hire you as a freelancer under your name. So you might have to get a DBA to be able to get into some of those contracts. Now, however, it is more common that the freelancer would have to incorporate the business, very common. But again, it might be a lower threshold, a lower barrier of entry just to have a DBA than actually have your own entity to bid on some of those contracts. Now, you can also use a DBA to operate several businesses at once. So one way to do this is to create a corporation to use the DBA. And this was just being asked here by Marlon. And this is useful if you open new branches or websites. So you can run the East market, the West market, and the Central City market all at the same time. So this is another reason that people do this, is that they want to operate multiple businesses under the same umbrella. So let's look at Credit Suite, for example, right? There's three main things we do. We help somebody improve their fundability, like tap into the lender and credit issuer secret criteria so you can meet that to improve your chances of getting approved. So fundability, right, could be two different ways for us. We could own the company fundability. That could be a separate legal entity, and we could set it up as a separate corporation, a separate LLC. That sounds good. Here's the problem. We got to file taxes on that, right? Like, we now need a separate tax return. We have to keep our books separate. Everything has to be separate. So the minute you go and create another company, well, then there's all kinds of maintenance you have to do on that company with accounting and books and all kinds of stuff. Maybe we don't want to launch fundability yet, but we still want the fundability name. Perfect example. We go get a DBA so we can operate under the fundability name without having to file taxes and pay pay the IRS and be able to keep our books separate, all that stuff. So it's a perfect example of a company that wants to expand or wants to actually have separate businesses under your one umbrella company, but maybe for some reason you don't want to set it up as a separate business for any of those things that we talked about. Like, you don't want to file taxes for a separate business. So that's another example of where a DBA can really be useful. Now, another use for these kinds of multiple DBA situations is when one business is incorporated and another is not. So if you use a different name when signing contracts or leases, you might lose the protections of being incorporated. But by using a DBA structure, you should be fine. It makes it clear to all that it's a corporation doing business, and corporations have various legal and tax provisions. So another way that can be used as well. Samuel says, great teaching. Thank you. I appreciate that. Shirley says, can you set up a DBA after you already have the LLC? You can. We'll talk about that here in just a minute. Not common, but you absolutely can. And Corey says, I have two DBAs and one LLC. Is there a way to attach those DBAs under the LLC? Several of you are asking the same question, so let's dive into that here. We're going to dive into that in just in a minute. So another use for DBAs is for the same person or group to run several different types of businesses. So as a corporation or LLC, you may expand to a new area, okay, not represented by your current business name, or create a whole new website or do something different. Having a more descriptive name could be helpful. Multiple DBAs allow for this. So your friendly corporation, okay, might be doing business as Dragon Tea Cozies, Mary's Flowers, and the Good Vibes Nightclub all at the same time. So this should answer everybody's question. You can file multiple DBAs under a corporation or under an LLC. So there absolutely is a way. And it depends on your state. We'll talk about that a little bit later. But in Florida, I can come in under a corporation or an LLC and I can file all kinds of DBAs, and you very well might want to do that. As a matter of fact, this is one of my favorite examples ever of DBAs. It really is one of my favorite examples ever. So we had this client and their name was Mafia Movers, right? That was their name, was Mafia Movers. Now, you know, Mafia Movers, I don't know why they did a DBA, but I can imagine, right? Mafia Movers kind of, makes some people scared if the moving company you hired is called Mafia Movers, right? So they obviously had some issues with that name, and they did a DBA of Gentle Hands. And I just thought that was kind of funny, because you have Mafia Movers, which sounds really, rigid and kind of scary. And then they do a DBA the opposite direction of Gentle Hands. So again, so many different reasons, ways you could do this. But to answer all of your questions, yes, you can use an LLC. You can use a corporation to file multiple DBAs under that. So what are some of the negatives? Well, multiple businesses can go by the same DBA in one state. So you're less restrictive to what you can actually choose, but there's also more leeway in the clarity of the business function. Okay, so you might need to register your DBA with the state, county, or city your business is located in, and registering your DBA name doesn't provide legal protection from it, and it does not take the place of incorporating. So let's dive into what I'm saying here. Okay, what I'm saying is that you can only have one company registered in a state. So Credit Suite is the only credit suite that can exist in Florida. There can be no more credit suites. Don't get me wrong. There could be Credit Suite, Apple's Credit Suite, Camera. It could be Credit Suite something else, but there can only be one credit suite in Florida. But there could be another credit suite in Tennessee, another credit suite in Utah, whatever. Now, again, my advice is never to set up a business if you can't own the domain. So typically, if there is another business, even in another state with the same name as me, I would never grab it if that domain is taken. But you can only register one company in the same name in any state at any given time. But this is not the case with DBAs. So you could come in that example I gave where Mafia Movers chose the name Gentle Hands. Gentle Hands is their DBA name. But there could actually be a Gentle Hands. That is the name of the actual entity in that same state. So you have to keep in mind that there can only be in the United States one company with the same name in a state. But that there could be hundreds of DBAs that are the exact same in any given state. So something to think about there. If you're using a DBA, there's nothing that locks it down. Anybody else that wants to use that DBA in your state can also use that DBA in the state. Okay, using a DBA does not give you naming rights. If you have not incorporated a business and assigned it the name of a DBA, anyone who registers that legal business entity can take that DBA name, okay? So again, just keep this in mind that you go all in on a DBA like Gentle Hands and you love it. Well, man, there could be 200 other Gentle Hands that pop up. Now, why would that happen? Because maybe Gentle Hands really takes off. Maybe a Mafia Movers crushes it. They find a niche that nobody has in the moving industry, and all of a sudden the DBA they're operating under, Gentle Hands, becomes gigantic, right? All of a sudden, ABC, Fox, there's a niche, and it goes viral, right? Now all of a sudden they're like, woohoo, we're Gentle Hands. Well, then maybe 3 other moving companies in Florida go, well, man, they're a DBA. They're not even incorporated. We're going to grab the DBA Gentle Hands as well and grab some of that business that they're getting. So again, these are problems. If you create a DBA and that company takes off and your name's not protected in that state, you could have tons of copycats that are coming in and copying that exact name because it's not protected. Now, DBA name just means you're able to do business in that area, in that county, in that state. But anyone else who wanted to incorporate is able to do so. So again, some things to keep in mind. You're not really protecting your business name with DBAs like you are setting up an entity and locking it down in the state. Now, if a sole proprietor dies and their heirs want to take over their business, well, the business may be legally required to close its doors through probate, since it's tied to the owner, not a separate entity, regardless of a DBA. So again, we talk about, and I'm not an attorney, not legal advice, can't say that enough, but we talk about legal protections. There's a reason you file entities, such as a partnership, such as a corporation, such as an LLC. It gives you legal protections. You don't have legal protections under DBA. So, and this is a perfect example of when things go bad. Maybe somebody passes away and then, they would love their business to take that over, but in probate, no will was actually filed. So as a result, then that business is required to close its doors. So that's a perfect example there of where things can go bad. When a DBA closes, it must file appropriate forms for dissolution with the county clerk. If a DBA owner chooses to sell the business, they can, but new paperwork must be filed with the county clerk to transfer the DBA to the new owner. So don't forget that. If you're going to sell a business, you have to transfer the DBAs with the business. If not, you still own the DBAs and you don't own the business anymore. Okay. The DBA owner also must notify the state and IRS that no longer be liable for income taxes, liabilities, etc. The owner would state in the Schedule C when filing the final business year's income that was the last year. They're just keep in mind that if you sell a business, the DBAs don't go with it. In almost all states, or every state that I know of, there's a process to recertify that to a new owner. So do corporations or LLCs ever want DBAs? Well, formal business structures like LLCs and corporations don't need to file a DBA name to use a brand name, bank in the LLC name, or to create privacy. Those are things that are standard. It's part of the business structure. The most important benefit is that a DBA allows formal business structures to create multiple brands. Okay. And several of you have asked this question. I have an LLC. Can I get a DBA? Should I get a DBA? Why would I get a DBA? Here's why. Because you want to basically operate under different brands. Okay. And we talked about some examples here with Credit Suite. We own the Fundability brand. We own the Business Finance Suite brand. Okay. We are Credit Suite. So for example, we have these different DBAs and these different aspects of our business because we have different products that they tie into. So this is where a corporation like Credit Suite would use DBA, and it's where LLCs, which many of you have asked, would also use DBAs because it's a branding play, again, without dealing with having to file taxes of setting all these things up as separate businesses, which could get time consuming, can get costly as well, okay? So what's the procedure for filing these? And Marlon says, so DBAs will have the same EIN number as a corporation or LLC? Absolutely. So this is a great question, Marlon, and I'm going to address this because this is where a lot of people screw up building business credit. When you build business credit, you build business credit and link it to an EIN. So if we use Credit Suite has an EIN. Fundability, Business Finance Suite, DBAs, not EINs. We can't build business credit for Business Finance Suite, that's a DBA, because it doesn't have an EIN. It uses Credit Suite's EIN. So the only way that you could build business credit for separate companies is if you have a separate EIN. And a DBA doesn't have a separate EIN. It operates under the umbrella company's EIN. So a lot of people ask me this, hey, I have 3 businesses. Can I set up business credit for all of them? Yes. Do all of them have an EIN? No. Only one of them has an EIN. The other 2 are DBAs of the one. Then no, you can only build business credit for the one with the EIN. Yes, we have 3 different businesses, 3 different EINs. Then you could build business credit for each separate EIN. So remember, the entity has an EIN. DBAs don't have EINs. Otherwise, they would be their own separate entities. So some things to keep in mind there. And Tarania, excuse me if I just messed up your name. Do you have to set up an LLC in every state? You don't. No, nor should you ever. I mean, that would be a nightmare to file taxes if you did so. So you don't need to do it. So you only need to file an entity in one state, preferably your home state. And eventually, when you get big, like Credit Suite's, surpassed $10 million in sales, right? So our accountants are now wanting us to go to Delaware to file corporations, et cetera, because of different legal protections. But typically, you're going to set up an entity in your state, and it's the only place you need to set it up. If you had to do that in every state, it would be a nightmare because you have to file taxes. And Corey says, so since I have 5 businesses, should I have 5 LLCs? Again, that's for you to decide based on what we're talking about today. You can do it either way. If you have 5 businesses, you could make it 5 separate LLCs, or you could make it 5 different DBAs. You have to look at the benefits and the drawbacks we're going to cover today and then make the best decision for your business. So procedures for filing a fictitious name vary among states. In many states, all you have to do is go to the county offices and pay a registration fee to the county clerk. In other states, all you have to do is place a fictitious name ad in a local newspaper for a certain amount of period of time. The cost of filing a fictitious name notice tends to range from $10 to $100. In Florida, you go right online to our Secretary of State website and you download what's called a fictitious name affidavit. You fill it in, you send it to them. That's how you do it. It's different in every state, but my advice to you is always check with your Secretary of State, because your Secretary of State is the best place where most of these things are set up. And by the way, guys, if you're getting value here, like this, love this, please share this to other people. It's the only thing I ask of you, because when you do that, it helps other people see this. So please, that engagement really means a lot to me. Throw a comment in here, ask a question if you have it, but like, love, and also share it. And if you're getting value from this, also subscribe while you're here. So what are the procedures? Again, your local bank may also require a fictitious name certification to open a bank account, especially if you're a sole proprietor, is what we talked about. Okay, DBA generally takes place at the county level, and that's the way that it is. Now in Florida, it really happens to do with our Secretary of State. Some states are different. So you might go to your Secretary of State, you might file in your county. Always check with your Secretary of State. A lot of times they make it really simple online to be able to do this. So the steps for getting them, as I mentioned, vary state to state. You want to check with your Secretary of State first. In Colorado, for example, they call a DBA a trade name. And here's a link you can actually see more at sos.state.co.us. And in Massachusetts, for example, getting a DBA is on the Secretary of State's list of what a new business needs to do in order to get started. So I'm giving you this to show you it is radically different between state to state of how this process is set up. Always start with your Secretary of State, though. It's where most of these DBAs are set up. Now, the IRS treats a DBA as an extension of a sole proprietor. Therefore, there's no need for a separate EIN for the business. In this limited circumstance, you can get away without having one. But again, as I mentioned, if you are a sole proprietor, you don't need an EIN. If you're any other entity, you do need an EIN, but DBAs do not need EINs. So if your business is a corporation or LLC, and if it is, the IRS already says that those are separate entities. So again, you don't need an EIN for each DBA. You just need an entity for each of or an EIN for each entity you set up. So DBA filings for a corporation or LLC often require a proof that the corporation or LLC is in good standing, which basically means that like you're recent, you're up to date and everything. This is often in the form of a good standing certification that you can register with the Secretary of State. You cannot make your DBA a corporate name. We talked about like incorporated corporation, things like that. You also can't use a name that indicates your business is owned by an LLC. Some states or county let you pay the filing fee by debit or credit card. Others require a money order. Some agencies allow you to file online, and some require notarized documents. It's just really different from state to state. So you want to check with your Secretary of State to figure that out. But again, you can't use LLC, you can't use partnership, you can't use corporation, you can't use those kind of things in the name because it's alluding to the fact that you're an entity type, that you're not really an actual entity type. Okay, and let me see here. Corey says, Letitia says, the bank says that each name needs a separate EIN. Every entity needs a separate EIN. But again, as I often talk about, when you go to get your bank account set up, you should give them your legal name and your DBA name. But the reason we're talking about bank accounts here is that a lot of banks won't let you set up a bank account for a business in your personal name. They make you file it under a business name, which is why you'd have to have a DBA in that case. Okay, and Kella says, is it okay to have credit in your business name if you want to build business credit? Absolutely. I have a ton of training on how to build business credit in your business name. Just remember, business credit is linked to an EIN of a business, so you can build business credit for every business you have an EIN for, but you can't build business credit for DBAs because you don't have a separate EIN for DBAs. Joey, thanks for coming in today. I always love seeing you. You're always here on our Facebook live streams. I appreciate it. Corey, you're welcome. And Adrian says, if I have a DBA already and want to create a new LLC, can I transfer the DBA to the new LLC? You can file for a new, and again, depends on your state, but my answer would be you could file a new DBA for the LLC, but whether you can transfer it or not depends on your state. You'd have to check with your Secretary of State. I wouldn't do it. I just set up, since there's no limit of DBAs you can set up in a state, I just set up a DBA under the new entity name. But whether there's an actual process for transfer or not, you'd have to check with your state. Not typical. So you typically just set up the new DBA under the new business. And Tarania, I hope I pronounced that right. Always great info. Thank you. And Tabitha, thanks for tuning in for LinkedIn, and thanks for saying great information. I appreciate that as well. Okay, so it's against state law to conduct any business using an assumed name that has not been registered. This is important, guys. Okay, very important. So what I'm saying is that you can't just pick a name and then just go start doing business under that name. It's illegal in a lot of states. So you've got to make sure that you've registered. If you're going to use a name out there in the world to sell products and services under, it's got to be registered. You got to register that DBA. It's illegal in a lot of states if you don't. Okay. And there's all kinds of state imposed penalties, which can be pretty harsh. These can include civil and criminal penalties. And in many states, a fictitious name registration lasts for a limited time and must be renewed. So don't forget that as well. You need to know how long your fictitious name affidavit is for, because it will expire and you have to renew it, especially if you're doing business under that name. Now, most states also require new filings if there's a change in the information of the original fictitious name filing. Your business address changes, your legal name changes, there's a change in officers. You've got to file again. You've got to update that information, the same as you're required to for any changes to your entity. And in some states, amendments are filed. In other states, a whole new registration is required. So again, varies. But if you're changing things like your business legal name, your address, a change in officers, there's a really good possibility that your state is going to mandate either you file a new registration altogether or an amendment to the existing one so they have that updated information. Okay. So do corporations need fictitious name filings? Well, most states, corporations don't have to have these. It's the same as LLCs unless you want to do business under that name. So DBAs aren't required with entities. Okay, but again, a lot of people, depending on branding and things like that, the same as we talked about, LLC may want them. So incorporating is how to get to the only business entity which you can use where you can build business and personal credit. Not really. You know, incorporation, LLCs, partnerships, separate entities like that allow you to actually build business credit. But as I mentioned, you can't build business credit under a DBA. A DBA is linked to your actual EIN. So if you want to build business credit, you have to have an EIN. You can't build business credit for a DIN or a DBA because they don't have EINs. Okay. And Fabry's Fashion Accessories says, what if they continue asking for a social? First of all, there's places you're just going to have to give a social. And the reason you have to give a social in these places is because they need to verify that you are a real individual in the United States. It's to prevent money laundering. And some of these things are setting up a bank account. Some of it, it's anything. As a matter of fact, in June of 2018, the government required banks that if they set up a new account for somebody, they have to verify your identity, which means if you go to set up a business bank account or get a business credit card from a bank like Citibank, the government requires Citibank verify your identity by getting your social. They need to know you're a real person so you're not setting up that stuff to launder money. So you're going to have to do that. The same way, if you're filing entities in some states, I think a lot of states, you got to verify, I'm going to say all of them, you have to verify. I'm always careful saying the word all because I could be wrong. I don't know the rules for every one of the 50 states. But in almost all the states, and I'm pretty sure for all of them, you have to provide your social. You have to verify you're a real person in the United States. And the IRS is how we recognize you as a real person. It doesn't matter. You have to do that when you get your driver's license. You have to do it when you set up a business. You have to do it when you set up a business bank account. You have to do it when you set up get a new account with the bank. But you don't have to create liability if you don't want to when you build business credit. You can build business credit and leave your social off those applications or give it to the source if they're giving you a bank credit card, but only to verify your identity. You're not giving them permission for a credit pull. So just keep that in mind. There's places you're going to have to provide your social. They have to verify who you are to know that it's not money laundering that's taking place. That's why they do that. Okay. And Kella says, great information. I appreciate that. And Shirley says, not PA. Okay. So I got to figure out that. Okay. Not in PA. Okay, perfect. And so Shirley brings up a great point. I try to tell you guys, this is different state to state. Every state's a little bit different. I've tried doing this training, tell you the differences of things that are going to differ from state to state, just so you know. So DBA filings will allow you to change your business name. They're useful for businesses looking to expand into new product areas, sell new products, change your branding, operate under a different name. Some banks and clients might require them if you are a sole proprietor, and they won't let you use your name as the company name. But a DBA filing has nothing to do with separating personal and business assets. It doesn't have anything to do with separating liability. It doesn't have anything to do with, building your business credit and making it easier to do there. It's really just for this purpose of operating under a different name for any number of different reasons we've talked about today. Okay, this also makes it to help when a sole proprietorship or partnerships decide to start building business credit, where you don't want to build business credit under your name. Incorporating and or getting it set up as an LLC really makes the most sense. Okay, so that gives you a lot of information about DBAs. Now you know what they are, how they work, you know how to register them, you know when you need them, when you don't need them, you know business credit building, liability, all those things tied to them. So hopefully that answers all of your questions on DBAs. If you're here on the live training, if you have any questions, type them in. I'll make sure I get them answered. And also feel free to give us a call with questions, 877-600-2487, 877-600-2487. Look, when you call us, we give you a free consultation that does three very important things. Number one, we do a fundability check for you, and we look at your name. A lot of our fundability checks, we go to your Secretary of State to make sure everything there is matching up with everywhere else on your business. And this is one of the biggest reasons people get denied. The business name on the Secretary of State isn't the name they're using on their application for funding. So this is a fundability check that we do when you call us. We also help you get your business credit reports for free. They're $249 from the bureaus. We get them for free. We give you tips and tactics to help you build your business credit. And we do a funding qualification for you. Look, a lot of people call us and they qualify for loans and credit lines, and they don't even think they qualify. So we qualify you for financing on that call as well. If you look at all of our reviews online, you'll see people rave about what happens on our consultation call. There's three ways to get it. Call us, 877-600-2487. Email us, info@creditsuite.com, or go to creditsuite.com/consult. And at creditsuite.com/consult, you can schedule a consultation to get all those things for free as well. And if you got value here, hit the like button, hit the love button. It's all I ask. It really means a lot to me. It tells these social channels, hey, this content's good, this information's good. And then it allows them an opportunity to show it to more people. So it means a lot to me. If you got value and you think your friends can get value, share this. And also like and subscribe on our social channels. If you're on YouTube, hit the subscribe, hit the bell, and click all so you're notified when we go live. We go live Tuesdays and Thursdays at 1, 11 o'clock on Wednesday, all Eastern time. And don't forget, we've got daily tips on how to get money for your business on Facebook, on Instagram, on Twitter, on a lot of our social channels. And we've got a podcast The Business Credit Financing Show, you can listen on your go. Nearly 400,000 downloads of this podcast. It's very popular. And not only we talk about ways to get money, but we talk about a lot of other things about starting and growing your business. So I have special guests on 3 days a week that teach you all kinds of things. Today's special guest, for example, taught you how to start and grow a business from home and make it profitable. So all those kind of trainings are available on our podcast, The Business Credit Financing Show. You can get to all of them at the top right of our page, creditsuite.com. Go there, click the link, boom, subscribe, and you'll get all those tips and all that access. Chili says, good morning. KeyBank closed my account for not verifying ID. And just so you know, it's not their fault. It's the government's requirement. The government now requires that they get that identification. And if they don't have it, they can get some serious trouble. So that's why they're doing that. And Shirley says, do you give your EIN or DUNS for building business credit? You give both. Sometimes sources don't ask for DUNS. Sometimes, and they almost all ask for your EIN. Sometimes they don't ask for DUNS or not, but I'm going to give you a tip since you brought it up. We've seen people get denied for credit cards because the application didn't ask for DUNS. Then they reapplied and gave them the DUNS number and they got approved. I've seen this happen more times than not. So even if you're applying for business credit and you have a DUNS number and it doesn't ask for it, always write the DUNS number on the application. I've seen many instances, guys. We've helped 42,000 people build business credit. I've seen many instances where people got denied without supplying a DUNS, supplied a DUNS, and ended up getting approved. And Jessica says, the information you've shared is so wonderfully valuable. I love Credit Suite. I've been a client for some time. I'm almost at the goal line to open my business. Great job, Jessica. I'm proud of you. Congratulations. And Corey says, on one of your videos, you said that we can go to Yext and this makes sure that we can get everything changed in one spot. Is that correct? Yes. There's several places online you can go to update your information in one place, and it updates it not everywhere, but hundreds of places online. We use Yext for this, Y-E-X-T, but they're not the cheapest, guys. So there's other sources that do what Yext does, but make sure that all of your online records are congruent. It's very important, and Yext can help you get that done. And thank you, everybody, for the thank yous. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for liking and subscribing. Thanks for sharing. I look forward to seeing you on our next training where we talk about more cool ways to get money for your business. Don't forget to give us a ring to get your free consultation at 877-600.